Hey guys, welcome back to EAK TV. We're here back in the beautiful Istanbul at the Solana Crossroads Conference. I'm delighted to have Austin Federa with me, the head of strategy at Solana Foundation. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, you're back in Istanbul again. I think I saw you last time in February at the Solana, what was it? The Solana Hacker House?
Yes, the Hacker House.
Yes, the Hacker House, yeah.
It's great to be back so soon.
So, yeah, it's great to have you. So, obviously as organizer of Istanbul Blockchain Week, it's great to see, exciting ecosystems like Solana come to Turkey. Why is Turkey such an interesting market for Solana?
So Turkey is interesting because there are developers and users building here, right? I think that it's one of those things where there's this idea sometimes that the Solana Foundation picks a place to go and then something happens. Yeah. It's usually the opposite way around. Okay. So there was something happening in Turkey that we noticed. Mm-hmm. And now, we're doing things like hacker houses here. This Solana Crossroads is entirely community organized. Yeah. We are a small, minor sponsor of the event, but we did none of the logistics. We really didn't help them put anything together. This is all put on by the community. And so there aren't many networks in the world that's the case. I think Ethereum is pretty much the only other network that has that kind of organic community conference culture to it. And so this is just a huge accomplishment for the folks in Turkey and the folks on the network. What we see in Turkey more broadly is we see a whole bunch of people who are very interested in developing on blockchain and also using blockchain. Yeah. And that's usually rare to find. There are a lot of countries that are excited to hold blockchain as an asset. There are places like the United States where folks are excited to be building stuff on blockchain. Yeah. But that combination is pretty rare. And so that's part of what makes Turkey and Istanbul such a great place for blockchain development.
Definitely. So, obviously you guys did the Hacker House, and I know this is a community event, so it must be great to see as the head of strategy, these community-led events that are actually happening naturally. Yeah. But, as the head of strategy, how do you decide, which markets you guys going to focus on?
Yeah, so there's this interesting model that works on something called super teams. And so super team is an outside organization. They're founded, they started in India originally. But they basically work with folks who are already active in the local communities here. So there's a whole bunch of people who are running a Solana community group already that were really passionate about that. And the role of the foundation is kind of just to come in and pour a bunch of gasoline on something that's already there and watch it take off. Okay. And so, from that perspective, Super Team Turkey is a direct outflow of that. They are working with universities, they're running education workshops and boot camps and helping developers sort of onboard to the network and build. So from our perspective and my role at the foundation, our strategy is less to go create things that don't exist, except on the software side where we do that all the time. Yeah. But on the community side, it's really about supporting and growing those organic networks that already exist. I mean, there's a ton about Turkey that makes it a really great fit for blockchain in general. It's a highly technical population that has really great schools and universities. It also has some economic challenges right now as a country. Yeah. And what we find is that in the United States, you have to convince people why blockchain makes sense. Because, where I'm from, we have a fairly stable political system, we have a fairly stable banking system. Might not feel that way right now, but on a global scale. Yeah, sure. Yeah. And, in places like Turkey, that is just apparent to everyone. They get very quickly what the value of crypto is and why it makes sense for a place like this. And they really start incorporating it into their daily lives. I mean, you can go to the Grand Bazaar here, and we accept crypto signs everywhere, which is not the case in most places in the world. Yeah,
definitely. Okay, cool. So, with Solana itself, when did Istanbul, or maybe not Istanbul, when did Turkey come on your radar when you're like, actually, we need to start investing in Turkey? Yeah,
so I'd say early 2022. And we have all sorts of metrics and dashboards and data that we see about where developers are building and where users are coming from, and one of the main ones are these hackathon submissions. Yeah. And you start to see Turkey work its way up the list of countries that were submitting projects, and not just submitting projects, but submitting good projects that we look at and our judges looked at, we're impressed by. Okay. And so, we follow the developers, right? And so it's like, you see a little bit of early signs that say, there's something happening here. Yeah. We should understand what that is, and we should see where we can support that development happening. And so, the Patika and that group they've sort of started running the Super Team Turkey operation, and it's been really exciting to see. And they really are independent of the foundation. The foundation provides a small grant to help them operate, but it's up to them to figure out what that business model could be, how they can engage with universities, build all those relationships, and we get to see the work they've been doing really pay off this week.
It's good. It's good to see that, like I said, that Solana's here. Also, there are other ecosystems investing in it in Turkey as well. I think that Cosmoverse is coming up in October. I think ETH Global have an event coming up soon. So it's going to get quite competitive at some point. But I'm hoping to see some of this. We're still waiting for a really excellent Turkish project that the whole community can get behind. And I'm hopeful that the Hacker House you did and these kind of events, maybe hopefully they'll be on Solana.
Yeah. But competition's good.
Competition is healthy.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But just taking a step back from Turkey, obviously you're head of strategy at Solana, which Solana's had its issues over the last years, as most projects have.
Sure.
But so I'm interested really from a strategic, holistic perspective. You obviously had the whole FTX crash, SBF issue.
Yep.
What was your take on that? How did that affect the Solana ecosystem?
Yeah, that period in sort of early November, especially coming right off of Breakpoint, which was the annual Solana conference. It was the biggest Breakpoint we've ever done. Yeah, we had over 3,500 people there, and most of them were developers. And to go right into FTX after that was a huge emotional roller coaster for a lot of us.
I'm sure, yeah.
What we really saw through that process is something we've known for a very long time, which is that FTX was not that involved in the network. They made a large financial investment in the network, and they also made a large financial investment in Polygon and Aptos and a bunch of other chains.
Yeah.
But the original tweet from SBF that sort of put Solana on the map in 2020, early 2021, I believe it was where a lot of people started learning about the network. So there was this idea of a really close relationship there, which didn't really exist.
Okay.
There was about a 1-year period of time where Solana Labs was doing a bunch of work with the team that was building Serum. And Serum was a central limit order book DeFi project that was being built by the folks at FTX. Mm-hmm. And their whole idea was that they were going to eventually put their centralized exchange out of business. They were going to build a decentralized finance exchange that was so fast and performant it could compete with centralized versions.
Yeah.
And that actually largely worked. The code from Serum has actually been taken over by the community and redeployed into something called OpenBook. And this was the first central limit order book built on chain. But what we saw in that sort of relationship with FTX in the early days was that somewhere between 2020 and sort of mid 2021, their competitive advantage shifted. They stopped being an organization that was focused on building and focused on real projects, and they started spending more time in Washington, D.C. They started trying to do complicated financial products. They started trying to they sort of were playing more in the traditional finance space. And so just very naturally, we stopped working with them. Not because we saw something that others didn't or something along those lines. This was still the time when Bill Clinton and Tony Blair were getting on stage with FTX and talking about how great it was and all these celebrities. But the path it felt that they were going down was just a Web 2 path. It was a centralized finance path, and that was something that the Solana Foundation doesn't support and isn't about. So, starting in sort of probably May and June of 21, that was really the last time any substantial work was done between the organizations. And so, the panic that happened in early November, I think was justified. I think in an absence of information, people will generally act afraid. And you can't really fault them for that. There's a lot of people who sort of ran out of the ecosystem. And what we've seen is they're now all coming back in, right? The number of validators operating on the network is just as high as before the FTX collapse. And the active user numbers are actually significantly higher. So what we've seen is that while there was probably a month to month and a half period of sort of a slowdown in activity, that hasn't persisted. And this most recent hackathon that just finished, Grizzlython, we had over 800 projects submit, which is the highest we've ever had. Huge numbers of registrations, and so that in the greater scheme of things, that was a blip in the journey of Solana and the community. And it's been really, really impressive to see the community come together and sort of replace the hole that was left by FTX.
Thanks for that. It was a really, comprehensive answer. And so I'm going to throw another tough question at you.
Let's do it.
So, the last bull run, the 2017 bull run, we saw big layer ones, Neo, EOS, IOTA, that largely are not seen as the kind of top layer ones anymore. Obviously, when there's a new and shiny thing, there's money to be made. People jump into it. There's a lot of hype around Aptos, a lot of hype around Sui, etc. How does Solana stay relevant, for the next few years, and make sure that you guys are still, spoken about, and not even just spoken about, because that's not important, but you're actually getting people to build and getting users and getting adoption, actually being a decentralized blockchain?
So there are only two networks that have both users and developers, and that's Ethereum and Solana.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing to look for. The thing that I would worry about myself is if we started to see developers leaving Solana.
Yeah.
But if you look at the Electric Capital report, which came out in January of this year, and that runs through the end of December, Solana has the fastest growing developer community in blockchain. It's the second number of overall developers, only behind Ethereum.
Okay.
And so what we see is that asset prices do what they're going to do, and markets do what they're going to do, but over the long term, it's the place where the developers want to build that's going to be the most successful, and the place where users want to transact. And so that combination that we see is pretty rare. And that another of the important metrics we look for are developers who are new to Web3. Where are they coming in, right? And so we still see the folks who they worked at Google or Amazon or Facebook or these large tech companies for 8 years, and they're done doing that thing and they want to build something in Web3. They're building projects on Solana.
Yeah.
And so as long as those things continue, I think that's kind of stands really good for the future of the ecosystem. What I'll also say is look at technology. And from a technology standpoint, Solana is still ahead of any of the competitive L1s in the space by a wide margin. So, the Aptos maximum transactions per second over a 30-day period, I think it's somewhere around 350 transactions per second. Solana's steady state is running at about 5,000 transactions per second nowadays. And so, you look at the best scaling solutions out there for Ethereum, if you look at, the ZK EVM that just launched, ZK Sync, or if you look at Optimism or Arbitrum or the Hermes coming from Polygon, those are all meaningful improvements in Ethereum scalability, but they're 7x. They're going from 14 transactions per second to somewhere around 80 to 90 transactions per second. These are still far below what Solana can deliver. And so the types of experiences and the types of applications you can build on Solana feel to a user like they're Web 2. They don't have all this compromise about being built on blockchain. At the same time, Solana has the highest Nakamoto coefficient of any proof of stake network. It has 2,000 validators running on mainnet. That is less than Ethereum's 7,500 validators, but that's higher than any other network. And so from a decentralization and a security standpoint, Solana is really in that number 2 position there.
Yeah.
And so if we can keep that momentum up, if we can keep the investments in these fundamental technologies going, which we're doing, right? Like the FireDancer, which is a new client coming to the network, is a huge investment in both performance, reliability, and security of the network. These are all really good signs into the future that developers still want to build here and users still want to transact on Solana.
Okay, so we've seen a recent trend, because blockchains are actually working, metaverse are actually live. We've seen a lot of Web 2 companies coming to Web 3, and we've seen like Polygon make a very big effort with that. With some of their partnerships with like Starbucks and Disney, etc.
Sure.
Is that a focus area for Solana? And if not, what is your focus areas for Solana?
So, the Web 2 large companies coming to Solana, or any blockchain, is, I think, a little overblown at this point. I mean, Google is building out infrastructure for Solana. 70 of the world's largest financial institutions already work on Solana through Pyth. Okay. So Pyth is an on-chain data oracle. These are, Jump Trading, Citadel, Jane Street. The world's largest financial networks are already building on Solana. They're not household names, so it doesn't make as much noise as Starbucks.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, you have to look at what the nature of that integration is. And most big consumer-facing Web 2 companies still treat their Web 3 work as experimentation, as opposed to core functionality.
Like an innovation lab kind of
exactly,
thing.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're doing it in public now instead of private, and that's a huge accomplishment for the industry.
Yeah.
But when Discord went and did their first Web 3 integration, they did it with Solana. Google is building out a ton of support for Solana infrastructure through that. Payments on Solana are powering like transactions on ASICS, the Japanese shoe company. Right? There's lots of these sort of things where what we are really focused on are Web 2 companies that are ready to start competing with their Web 2 business using Web 3. And I think that's the thing to really look for in the future of this stuff is how are companies adopting Web 3 in a way that feels meaningful and real and not just as an experimentation pilot. And that's not to say the work on Polygon isn't that, but right now it isn't that. It could be someday. I don't have any access to their internal documents. But the Starbucks program isn't really launched yet, and it's also going to take credit cards.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So but do you? I mean, I don't know the structure of the Solana Foundation at all. So do you guys have a division or somebody focused on bringing in those major brands, or is that just you just wait and go? You come to us.
No, so we certainly have some of that, but mostly that's in the area of relationship building. So when a Web 2 company is ready to do something serious in Web 3, we want them to pick Solana. Yeah. That's what we were sort of seeing already. But we need the relationships to exist for that to happen. And sometimes that is helping them find developers who, for their internal innovation teams, that know how to program on Solana.
Yeah.
Sometimes that is actually going through an RFP process with them to help submit a technology brief. Sometimes that's connecting them with other folks in the ecosystem. So, that is where the Web 2 adoption we've had already comes from.
Yeah.
It's that relationship building over time, but it's less transactional. It's less like, okay, we're going to give you a grant to build this thing on Solana, and it's more about let's just build some engineering collaboration. Let's help you run a pilot for your own internal team, and help you understand what's possible to be built on Solana, because what's possible to be built on Solana is more than what's possible to be built elsewhere. And so if they're coming to us with a pre-packaged, here's our Web3 experimentation idea, half the time we're like, you could do that, sure, but here's what else you could do, right? Here's what the cheap and the fastness and the scalability of Solana actually will deliver for you.
Okay.
And those are conversations that take a much longer time because it's not turnkey.
Yeah.
So gaming is a great example of an area where we work very closely with a ton of large Web 2 game studios because gaming gets it in a way that a lot of the other areas don't yet.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit into the NFT side. So obviously, we saw DGods have gone to Polygon as well.
Yeah.
And obviously, I assume that's a bit of a blow.
Well, DGods went to Ethereum.
They went to Ethereum, sorry.
But Utes went to Polygon.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
So, obviously that is a bit of a blow, whichever way you look at it.
Sure, yeah.
And I want to know if, did they, speak to the Solana Foundation, did they, make some demands, be we will stay on Solana if X, or did they just go up and leave? Was there a conversation? What happened?
Yeah, so, there's been a lot of numbers reported out there in terms of asks made by that team. It's not something I can really confirm. We don't talk about on those internal discussions, but obviously before you take money from someone else, you try and have a conversation with the place you're already at. I think that's about as much as I should say on that topic. But what I will say is that the NFT projects that are on Solana that are here for a reason. And that reason is they're usually building other technology or the project is making use of something on blockchain that it can't do elsewhere. I mean, the fact that DGods actually migrated to Bitcoin as well, right? It's sort of, that's a really powerful culture and a really powerful community. They're not building technology at the end of the day. They're building a brand, and brands are fantastic. And I genuinely wish them the best of luck with what they're doing and building. But the projects that we are most focused on are those that are actually building something on Solana that needs the network characteristics. Because at the end of the day, brands, by their very definition, are portable, right? The fact that Louis Vuitton can build a phone case means that the thing about Louis Vuitton is not tied to the product, it's tied to the image and the idea. And if DGods is building something like that, props to them. That's an incredible accomplishment. But there's nothing where they need Solana to do that. That project, there's no reason it couldn't exist on all chains simultaneously, right?
Sure.
And at that point, what you're talking about is something that's more of a cross-chain idea than a network-specific project. And so from that perspective, obviously we wish they would have stayed on Solana, but the projects that we are focused most on are the ones that are building stuff where they don't really have, they need something that only Solana can deliver.
Okay.
And this is not an NFT project, but groups like Helium. So Helium's a decentralized wireless network. There's over 1 million hotspots all around the world. They're all migrating to Solana as their new layer 1 home. As part of that, they're doing the largest NFT mint anyone's ever done in the history of blockchain. And they're doing that on Solana because there's nowhere else in the world they could do it on.
because the characteristics of Solana fit with what they need.
Because with state compression, you can mint 100 million NFTs for $1,500.
Yeah.
That those sort of economics you can't do anywhere else.
True. So just a quick question then, obviously FTX has disappeared. Do you feel like there needs to be another big centralized exchange for the Solana ecosystem to replace them?
I really hope not. I think centralized exchanges are the kryptonite of all networks, right? And the best thing that Ethereum ever did was escape the reliance on any sort of centralized exchange.
Okay.
And, call it by fire and brimstone, but Solana has now escaped its reliance on a centralized exchange as well after the complete collapse of FTX. So no, I don't think we need another centralized exchange to sort of be involved with the Solana network.
Okay.
What I will say is there's a lot of really interesting work being done on hybrid exchanges now, where the user goes through a full KYC process, but they bring a ledger with them. And they plug their ledger into the centralized exchange. And so the custody is actually with the user. Now those centralized exchanges, these hybrid exchanges we can call them, they'll probably be a little bit more expensive to transact on, right, for a bunch of reasons. But at that point, as long as it is your keys, it is your crypto. And so engaging with a centralized trading platform in an area where the user still retains self-custody, I don't think is the worst thing in the world. And that may actually be the new sort of hybrid to onboard lots of users.
Yeah. And so there's some of those on Solana?
I mean, none of them have launched yet, but a lot of them are, most of those hybrid exchanges, they're building on Solana as some of that core base layer infrastructure because the network is so fast. And that allows them to do a mix of DeFi and centralized exchange work together in one space. But also, it means the deposits can be quick. Like if you do a trade on a centralized exchange, and then the exchange is like, okay, you have 30 seconds to deposit your crypto, or else we're going to cancel your order, you have to do that on Solana, right? But there's a lot of cool applications there where you can get some of the user friendliness of a centralized exchange with none of the custody risk of a centralized exchange.
Okay, well I look forward to seeing those come out.
Yeah.
Look, you're head of strategy at Solana. What is your strategy for 2023?
So I think 2023 for the industry is going to continue to be a little bit of a rough year. I don't think we're going to see some massive rebound in asset prices, until in August or something like that. And because of that, it means that the work we're doing is continuing to focus on the fundamentals. So Solana.org/grants is that whole open source granting portal and application there. And so the kind of work we are funding and building are tooling for the network that'll help more developers build more easily. So state compression is an example of a project that we took on as a strategic initiative at the foundation. Interfaces is another one, which will make it easier for people to deploy new token programs and new types of contracts on the network and wallets to be able to find them. It's not sexy stuff, right? It's the nuts and bolts underneath that really enables developers to build amazing things. But if you don't have people building that fundamental base layer technology and investing in it, it's rough. Another big thing for this year is policy. The European Union has some pretty intense new regulations for crypto coming into phase in 2024. The United States is obviously going through its whole process right now. So we're spending a lot of time advocating on behalf of the Solana network and the wider Web3 community to make sure that when regulation does come, it's sensible, it is a working framework that doesn't break the fundamental assumptions of crypto, but also gives governments, the ability to do whatever they need to do to make them feel comfortable with this technology. And I'm actually very hopeful about that process. I think if you look at some of the early fights over the internet, there was an idea that the government wanted it, but in the US and Europe, everywhere in the world, they wanted it to be permissioned. And permissionless internet won out. But it takes a while to have those sort of philosophical conversations and battles to actually bring people around with you and build support from the global community that says, no, we actually need crypto to stay permissionless. That doesn't mean that I don't need an easy way to generate a file that says I wasn't involved in a suspected North Korea transaction. I think it's very reasonable for the government to say, show us proof that, you were not involved in this transaction that we think is illicit. But projects on Solana that are privacy focused are actually building those kind of fraud proofs into them.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to see.
Okay, well, look, final question.
Yeah.
For our audience, what projects on Solana that are coming are you most excited about?
I'm really excited about the social space.
Okay.
So Spling Labs is doing some very cool work with decentralized social media. There's a few other ones that are doing that kind of work, but there's sort of this thesis between like 2016 and 2020 in the Web 2 world that failed. Yeah. That was that we can have small social networks that are community driven that will be financially successful. And that didn't work in Web 2 at all. They all failed. And they all failed because they all, at the end of the day, had ads to monetize as their only way to monetize.
Yeah.
With crypto, I think you can build smaller communities that are closer to like the message boards we had back in like the early 2000s.
Yeah, I used to be on them a lot.
Yeah. They were great. And like you miss that. Like Facebook is not a replacement for that. Twitter is not a replacement for that. And so we're seeing more and more tooling built and economic models built to enable small communities to be economically viable in Web3. So I'm very excited at that. The other piece is the big push into mobile, right? From Solana Mobile to Helium to Hive Mapper to all these token incentivized physical networks and decentralized physical infrastructure projects. I think that is a huge new area for the ability of, across the world, everyone is frustrated with centralized infrastructure. And like, certain things need to be centralized. The waterworks, right? Fresh water is probably a good centralized operation for a government to do. But telecommunications, does it need to be the case?
Yeah.
Electricity grids even? We don't know. There's a lot of this work that's being done now that I think we're going to see very interesting experimentations with decentralized physical infrastructure.
Actually, now you touched on the mobile phone, I'm going to throw in one more question.
Yeah.
I remember seeing there's a Solana gaming console coming. Did I hear about that?
It's a phone.
I know about the phone, but I thought I heard there's a gaming console coming. Maybe I was mistaken.
We are not building one. Someone might be.
Might be.
If you're building a gaming console in Solana, I'd love to talk to you.
Okay. But the phone, who is building that phone? Is that like a project from you guys, or is that a third party?
So Solana Mobile
How did that come about?
Yeah, totally. So Solana Mobile is part of Solana Labs.
Yeah.
But Solana Labs is a bunch of software engineers. They're not building hardware.
Okay.
So the hardware is in partnership with a company called Awesome, OSOM, which the founder there is the guy who built the iPad Pro.
Okay.
He built the Essential phone. He has a long history of really high-end hardware. And it's being manufactured by a company called Lens, which is a contract manufacturer in China.
Okay.
So, I would not trust a bunch of Solana engineers to build hardware either, and you don't have to, right?
Yeah.
But the idea there is this is a collaboration between the two companies where the software is fully open source, and that Solana mobile stack can be taken by anyone and put onto any hardware manufacturer can use it on their phone.
Okay.
But we need to build a flagship phone to show people this is possible, and that's where Awesome comes in.
And are you expecting this to be mainstream adopted, or is this for the Web3 nerds like you and me?
So I think it's for the Web3 nerds at start.
Okay.
The hope of this is to show the larger manufacturers that adding Solana to your phone, adding Web3 support to your phone, can be a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
And in the markets like Turkey, where it's a very competitive phone market, right,
Yeah.
or India, where it's a very competitive phone market.
Africa.
Yeah, Africa.
Yeah.
Adding the Solana mobile stack could be a differentiator that says, there's how many millions of people in Turkey that own Solana and own crypto. If they have a phone option to securely custody stuff with them and all this ability to access the decentralized app store, maybe that's why they buy one phone over another phone next time they go to buy a new phone. So our hope is it's sort of similar to the Microsoft Surface line, where the Microsoft Surface line showed Dell that it was okay to build a good computer. Because back in those days, like every Windows PC was trash compared to a Mac.
Yeah.
And now you can get fantastic Windows PCs. But if Microsoft hadn't done this and sort of said, we're going to build a flagship Windows computer that's just as good as a Mac, we wouldn't have that today. So that's the hope with Solana Mobile, is it shows people a path to something better.
So I played with the mobile at the Breakpoint in Lisbon.
Yeah,
and
Saga.
It was very cool. But like, when is it available now, or when is it going to be available
so
for the public?
So we shipped them to developers already. The general public launch is early April.
Early April. Okay, so in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right, Austin. Well, look, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Where can people find out more about Solana and yourself?
Yeah, so Solana.com has a list of all the resources there for where to get building. For me, Twitter, I'm Austin_Federa.
Okay. Austin, thanks so much for your time, guys. That's EAK TV. We'll see you again next time.